This is a short story about a drive I did in 1977 from Kuwait to Reading in the UK, and it's entitled 4,000 Miles in 7 Days Solo, or An Idiot in a Fantastic Car. It seems that it's not just the British that think a foreigner will understand if you shout the words. Finally, they understood that I just wanted a transit visa, and I understood I could get one, but first I was to be dealt with by an elderly officer who wanted to see the car. We walked out of his office and I pointed out my car. I don't think he'd ever seen a 280 SL Mercedes before, and certainly had not so loaded to the gunnels with 2 metal trunks on the roof, along with a tartan suitcase between them. He told me to open the doors. He looked in, shook his head, and indicated he wanted a seat in the boot. He was carrying a stick, fairly long, but with no apparent use, until he poked it into the boot and pushed it forwards towards the front of the car. He then marked the stick, removed it, went to the door and repeated the stick pushing exercise, only this time towards the rear of the car. Again, he marked the stick. Now he put the stick alongside the outside of the car, and in the dirt that had now daubed the vehicle made a mark. First the measurement he had taken in the boot, and then the measurement from the cab. There was a substantial gap between the 2 marks, and this he wanted explained. He indicated his desire by pointing at the gap between the 2 marks, leaning his head to one side and placing a quizzical look on his face. He did this way because he didn't speak any English, and I didn't have 1 word of Hungarian, but it worked. Now all I had to do was to explain it. For those reading this who know English, it will be reasonably simple. Those of you that don't will be as baffled as he was. The car was wearing its hardtop, which on that model looks very permanent when it actually isn't. It can be removed, and by lifting a panel at the back of the seating area you can pull up a soft top. The gap between the marks, which concern the poor man, is the space where the soft top is stowed. Now try to get that across to a Hungarian in the 1970s who's never seen a Mercedes 280 SL before and has probably hardly ever seen anything other than washing cars. He gave up trying to understand. Indicating to me that I should wait at the car, he disappeared, returning a while later with a young uniformed officer with whom I again went through the process of explanation. I showed him by sketching on a scrap of paper how the very permanent looking hardtop came off, and with more hand signs and signals how the soft top came up. He smiled, wandered round the car, stopping to study something every now and again, and finally stopped at the still open driver's door. He looked inside, leaned in, took out my favourite music cassette. He looked me in the eyes, pointed at the cassette and then at himself, which gave me a good clue as to what he wanted. "Yours," I told him, and reinforced it with a gesture he understood. He put it in his pocket and indicated I should follow him. Now, was I going to be in trouble for attempted bribery, or what? He took me to a desk, spoke to the chap sitting behind it, who took my passport, which I'd been clutching, and stamped a page where he found a bit of space. Then, in broken English, he told me I had 12 hours to transit the country. I thanked the young officer and drove off. I had just 12 hours and hoped it would be enough. Approaching Budapest, I saw what looked like a decent roadside restaurant. I pulled into the car park, parked beside some beaten up old bangers and went in. It was most pleasant, with what looked like a good menu. Problem was, I had no idea what it all meant, so I looked around the other tables, saw a dish that someone else was eating that looked good to me and pointed to that. The waiter nodded and said in good English, "That is a good choice. Is that your car outside?" I told him it was, and he leaned forward towards me and whispered, "If you let me have a drive, I shall pay for your lunch. He was a very nice young man, but not nice enough to take a chance like that, so I paid for the meal and offered my apologies, explaining that my visa was only for a short time and I had to get going. I would love to have stopped to explore Budapest, but was worried about the time limit on my visa. So I just followed the signs which took me alongside the river. To this day I don't know if I was on the Buda or the Pest side, but Pest or Buda, I kept on moving towards my next border crossing into Austria. Once again, a crossing with no problems, neither out of Hungary or into Austria. It was getting dark now and the headlights were called for. The roads were good. My stomach was telling me I should eat soon, and I decided that now I was back in proper Europe, the central railway station in Vienna would be the best place to try for. Easy to find, and if it was anything like most big European central stations, it would have a really good restaurant. I had less than 50 miles to go. But in those 50 miles, I was pulled up twice by the police, who told me I had a headlight out and must get a bulb replaced immediately. At the first garage I found, I bought a bulb and fitted it. I was right about the choice of eating place. The restaurant at the Vienna Central Station was beautiful. Tables laid with white tablecloths, silver cutlery, at least it looked like silver, and immaculate waiter service. I can't remember what I chose off the substantial menu. After all, it was many years ago, but I do recall it was very good. The meal and the rest and a good wash I had at the station set me up to continue. The next leg would take me into Germany. Germany, I thought to myself, efficient, thorough, officious, correct. Here I am now in a very dirty Merc with Arabic number plates, my dark hair, brown eyes, and the terrorism has started. I shall take a back road, I decided, not a busy one on the main route. I studied my map book and found the best route I could take was the A8. This seemed like the best option. From Vienna to the border crossing, it would be about 160 miles, 2.5 hours I reckoned. I should arrive there around 1 o'clock in the morning. Should be quiet, I hoped. The drive was good roads, I felt good. The back of the journey had been broken and I was back where I could make myself understood, and anyway, a lot of people would speak English. The only thing which marred the good feeling I had was trying to anticipate what was going to happen when I got back to the UK. Importing the car and the fact that it was full to overflowing with stuff from the Middle East, with several cartons of cigarettes as well. I wasn't going to smoke that lot before I got back. What would happen at Dover? How much of a problem would I face there? Still, that was way off yet. Take things as they come, I told myself. Worry not what might happen, just worry if and when it did. I took my own advice and put the UK board at Dover out of my mind. With the music cassette playing on high volume, I approached the Austrian border control and was virtually waved through. A short distance on, I came to the German border buildings. This is the life, I thought. Great, no problems. I pulled up in one of the clearly marked parking spaces closest to the barrier. This was Germany after all, and there were no other vehicles waiting. In fact, I'd not seen much traffic for the last few miles. With light heart, I went into the building, saw a couple of uniformed officers sitting having a chat, and, using my little bit of German, told them I wished to enter their country. Both of them stood and walked towards me, indicating they wanted to see the car and all the papers. They waited with hands on hips, one hand a little too close to the pistols dangling from their belts for my liking, whilst I opened the glove box, took out the carnet de voyage and my passport. That was not enough. They wanted to see the registration documents. I took the extra paperwork and handed it to them. It was all in Arabic, which having realised they couldn't read it, handed it back to me. Opens the engine compartment, one of them ordered. I released the bonnet catch and opened the bonnet. They found the VIN plate and compared the number with that written on the carnet de voyage. Then they searched for the engine number and compared that. Next they checked the number plates, which were in both European and Arabic numerals. Those checked out. Opens the back, came another command. I did as I was told, and they both stood and studied the contents without touching anything. One of them then leaned into the car and looked around. Laying on top of everything in the back of the cab were my two guitars. One was a wire string and the other a gut. He reached into the back and took out the wire string guitar, turned it upside down and shook it. White dust from the Kuwait desert fell on the floor. He reached down, touched it with his finger and sniffed it. It's just dust, I told him in English, because I didn't know the German word for dust, never having done any housework there. They ignored me completely and said, "Now you go to Zoll." "I thought you were the Zoll," I said. I knew that word, customs. "No, we are the police, now Zoll. We send out, wait by car." And they turned and disappeared back to the door from whence they had emerged with my guitar. I waited. Almost immediately, two more officers appeared. They walked straight to the car, looked inside, then in the boot, which was still open. They had a little chat between themselves, then pulled across a very large flatbed trolley. "Unload the car completely and the boxes on the roof." "Everything?" I asked. "Everything." Shit was the word that entered my head, but I made sure it didn't escape through my mouth. 1:30 in the morning, and I had to go through this again. I unloaded everything, placing it all on the trolley until the trolley was full. They pulled over another trolley and I finished the job. They carefully observed everything as I laid the numerous items on the trolley. Finished at last, I said, "That's everything." "Good. Loads the car. After coming to office, brings the other guitar." Oh, bugger. Did they really think the dust was something other than dust? I reloaded the car. It didn't take as long as time as I had some practice. With the last piece stowed, I picked up the gut string guitar and walked to the office.